Hey, welcome back to another video. Hopefully I can get this done before more airplanes take off. But I got an email the other day from a viewer who is getting ready to go to mediation, and they have a young child and a toxic narcissistic ex. And the question that the person was asking is well, what do I say to the mediator? And I want to cover this in two different spots. So the first thing is, unless you have a diagnosis of a mental disorder, be very careful of what you say to the mediator about what the problem is. Focus on the patterns of behavior. I had a video, interview I did with Joe Cordell. I'll put a link up in the card above on that, so check that out because he talks specifically about how to deal with this situation in court. You want to focus on the patterns of behavior. You don't want to start throwing out allegations or name calling or whatever, because it hurts your credibility. So don't be going in and saying, my ex is a narcissist. You really want to focus on the patterns of behavior, what they're doing, and how it really pertains to your child. You want to be a little cautious about focusing on what they're doing to you, because, that's important, but that doesn't necessarily lead to a custody issue. If they have a high conflict with you, but there's nothing wrong with them with the children, then it's not a big deal. A lot of people will take that step. They're like, well, they treat me like crap. They're verbally abusive to me, blah, 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 all this laundry list of things. And the comment that's going to come back is, okay, well, how are they with the kids? Obviously, you guys are getting a divorce, so you hate each other, but how does this affect the kids? So you want to focus on everything on how this pertains to the kids and how the pattern of behavior really affects the children and their development and their interaction with them. Also, be really careful about just making accusations if you really can't back it up with fact. The reason I say that is because everyone says this, right? Even when there's not an issue, typically a person is going to say that they have an estranged relationship with their kids, they're a horrible parent, they're all that stuff. That's the same thing that happened with me. My ex was trying to play that game, saying that I was a horrible person, shouldn't be around the kids, I should only have limited time around them. And everyone says that, so your credibility is really low. So unless you have specific things you can dial into, it's going to hurt your credibility. And then that rolls into being realistic about what you really think you're going to get. If you're going in and you don't have any specific evidence of violence or physical abuse against your child, it's going to be a really hard sell to try to say that your narcissistic ex cannot or should not be around the other parent. Most courts are going to try to set up a visitation schedule to where both parents have time with the child. And in a lot of areas, they're really moving more towards 50-50 as a baseline anyways. So the days of automatic weekend parent or weekend dad, this happens to both parents now, but this can happen to both parents. Typically, it's the non-working parent that gets the majority, or used to get the majority of the kids, and the working parent is the one who gets limited time. That's not necessarily the case anymore. So if you're thinking that you're going to get 80-20, you could be setting yourself up for disappointment. Most courts are really pushing towards 50-50. So unless you have something really definitive to try to set the stage for that, you could be severely disappointed. The good part about that is if you're on the side of this, that you're being portrayed as a monster and your ex is trying to say that you should have limited time with the kids, the likelihood it's going to happen as long as you don't make any mistakes is pretty low. On the flip side, if you're dealing with somebody who is toxic and you're like, oh crap, I don't want them to have a lot of time, the likelihood that is going to happen, that they're going to get limited time, is pretty low as well. The thing is at the beginning stages of this is your best opportunity to get the best deal that you possibly can. So whatever you're trying to accomplish it then. Get the situation to where you get the most amount of time or the best deal that you possibly can then, because anytime you go back to change it without some legitimate reason to really push for a change, it's really a hard sell to try to make a change. So what I mean on that is if you finish court with a permanent order, I'm not talking about temporary order, of 80-20, like weekend dad, and then you go back, or weekend parent, I should say, and then you go back and say, well, I want more time, it's going to be a harder sell than to try to establish it up front. The only caveat with that is if you have young children and the court says, okay, well, right now they need to have more stability, one parent can handle it better because of work schedules are not working, and then later readjust it. But even still, I would encourage you to try to get the best deal possible. Now, if you have young kids and you have a toxic ex and you can get the majority, great, go for it. And then, later on down the line, if they decide they want more time, then you'll have to deal with that. Typically, here's the deal. There's two main issues why a person will go back to try to get more time. And it's either because money, because that's typically children or money, and some type of supply to where they need the children to validate who they are. Typically, a narcissistic ex, unless they're getting money out of this, so that's typically like the non-working parent is going to want the most amount of time to get the most amount of money. But if you're dealing with a narcissistic ex, a lot of times they don't care. They don't really want the kids because it interferes with what they're trying to do, unless they get their supply from being the quote-unquote parent. If that's the case, then they're going to fight tooth and nail for everything they possibly can get, because they will have that prize being the kids and the majority of the resources to deal with things. My point on this is you have to be really cautious of how you approach this, because you can walk into this unrealistically and potentially hurt yourself. If you're going in and you're saying, my ex is a horrible human being and they should be not around the kids, unless you have some serious evidence or a diagnosis of a personality or a mental disorder, and even then, it's hard, the courts are really weird on this, but that's about your best bet. If you have a real bona fide diagnosis and you can have the experts come in to say, yes, this person has this disorder and this disorder will lead to these problems for the children, and yes, that is apparent, but they need to have limited access to minimize the damage, be really careful what you say, because you can hurt your credibility and come across looking as though you're just being vindictive, that you're just trying to orchestrate a story or basically spread a smear campaign to push the other parent out. And if the other person is able to key in on that and use that to their advantage, then it makes it real easy for them to come back and say, look, this other parent, they're slandering me, they're just trying to do this, they're trying to be controlling. They can focus on your patterns of behavior and how it's negatively affecting the situation and how that is negatively affecting the children, and it could blow up in your face. There are stories of parents where they do that. They play that game, and this has happened with moms, where they play the game where, my ex is horrible, the kids hate him, all that kind of stuff, and the other person is able to play it to where it's the mom gets pulled out of the relationship. Now, obviously we're dealing in situations where sometimes we don't know what's really true, right? So is that person who's doing that mom in that story I was just talking about, are they actually doing those alienation things? I'm not sure. Or is it just that that's the reality, but the other person was able to play their weaknesses against them to their advantage? Guys, you gotta really think about this. You have to really take a step back when you look at this and approach this in a pragmatic way. We have our views of what we think is going on. Not everyone else is going to look at that. And just because it's our reality doesn't mean that someone else is going to believe that story. You have to be really careful of how you piece this disaster together to make sure that you don't hurt yourself and you don't cause more conflict in your situation. The other thing I just want to say on this is that be careful how you deal with this, because if your narcissistic toxic ex is focusing on you and they know what's important to you, like let's say the kids, more than likely they're going to go after that, right? That's why you'll hear a story about a parent who's not involved, who's always been working, who's then turns around and is asking for full custody from a stay-at-home parent and saying that they're a horrible person. One is because they know that's exactly the worst thing that they can do to try to hurt you, is to destroy your relationship with your kids. That's the type of thing that they do. So be careful of how you play this game, because that's what they're going to key into. The next part about this is, if you think that you're going to be able to negate the other parent out of your children's life, you are living in a fantasy land. Yes, there are some people who are able to do it, but it is incredibly difficult to do that nowadays. 10 or 15 years ago, with the early stage doctrine and all those different things, where they were like, oh, let's put the stability with one parent. And guys, that's happening now, where even, it's like whoever the stable stay-at-home parent, even if it's the dad, sometimes that's the way it'll go. What I'm saying is you need to think about this, because more than likely you're going to have to interact with this person. If you are lucky, you will be one of the few people where the narcissistic ex says, I'm out, I'm done, I don't care, leave me alone. I'm not going to, I'm not going to pay you. I'm not going to give you any attention. I'm not going to see the kids. I'm not going to do whatever. That's a blessing in a lot of ways. Whenever that person is not actively trying to unravel your life and basically destroy your kids at the same time. It is so much harder whenever you actively are counter-parenting with one of these people, because you cannot co-parent with one of them. They are not going to work with you. They are not going to have a civil conversation. They are not going to look around and think of what's best for the children. They're going to think about what's best for them. Now, they may turn around and come back and say that it's in the best interest of the child, but it's only in their best interest. Yeah, you'll notice that right off the bat whenever you're trying to have a conversation with making decisions for the good of the kids, and they don't give a rat's ass how it affects you. They just want to make sure that their needs and their priorities are met. So here's the thing. If you're getting ready to go into mediation, focus on the patterns of behavior. Focus on what's really going on. If the person isn't involved, focus on that. If the person doesn't ever go to appointments, focus on that. If the person doesn't has problems where they're not able to do certain things, focus on that. If they blow up, focus on that. Focus on incidences, document that so that there's actually a legitimate pattern of behavior, and just be really, really careful that your documentation doesn't just look like you're nitpicking to try to destroy the other parent. It needs to be legitimate, and it needs to come across as a sincere concern. If all it is you saying, oh, well, they do this, this, and this, and it's basically kind of like taking something and trying to blow it out of proportion, it's going to hurt your credibility. To be perfectly honest, if you're in that situation, you're much better off just saying, oh, crap. Ask your attorney what is typical, and more than likely, if it's 50-50, make sure you get the best damn deal you can. At that point, what I would say on that is make sure all the holidays are covered, make sure that you do week on, week off, because I tell you, the split schedule I have is a nightmare. You want the biggest amount of consecutive time with your kids as possible. Focus on that. If you turn around and you're just trying to slam the other parent, and you know it's true, but it looks like that's what it is, you're going to lose. And then you're going to dump a ton of money, and you're going to create a whole nightmare scenario that it's going to make it even harder to get out of. And what I mean by that is if you fight someone tooth and nail and they're a narcissistic ex, they don't forget that crap. They are going to basically torpedo you for the rest of the time. Thing is if they want 80-20 and you get 50-50 or you get more time, that's what you need, but just expect that they're never going to get over that. They are going to try to make your life a living hell out of that from this day forward. And then the final step on this is just making sure that you keep your environment as stable as possible. So try to win what you can in the beginning of this, but as soon as it's basically over, what you want is stability with yourself, stability in your home, and stability with your kids. Those three things wrap up together to make sure that the other parent can't, launch, well, they still are going to try to launch a parental alienation attempt, but the effectiveness of it is going to be a lot less. If your kids feel safe and secure with you, they may still throw you under the bus, which is annoying, I get that, but the likelihood that they're going to throw you under the bus enough to where custody changes and stuff like that is a lot less. So I know that this isn't exactly a tremendous, glorious information. It's not the greatest information in the world, but it's realistic. And I'm trying to make sure that you don't set yourself up for failure by focusing on an end state or a course of action that really isn't going to help you and could potentially hurt you. All right, guys, that's going to wrap this video up. You could check out that card I was mentioning before about the interview. I'll put it at the end screen as well. If you think this video is helpful, please share it out to someone else. Like it if you like it. If you're new and you want to subscribe, please hit subscribe. Hit the bell notification so YouTube tells you about the videos, and I'll chat with you on the next video. Take care.